Hey guys, today I want to tell you about my experience after 50 hours of playing the early access of the survival MMO Pax Dei. I'll tell you about my experience with the 3 gameplay elements in the game and some of the features that the devs are working on for future releases. I'll also give you some helpful tips if you're thinking of starting Pax Dei or if you're in the early game now. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you my ultimate verdict on the game. So if you're wondering what kind of game Pax Dei is, it's essentially a directed sandbox MMO, and I'll explain why I use the word directed later on in the video. Imagine being dropped on a beautiful new planet with all the plans and resources you need to build a new life, with no quests, no tasks, and no NPCs with exclamation marks. You're a true pioneer left to your own devices. Unless you're playing with friends, and then you can do whatever you want. You can build an entire castle or a medieval village down by the water. It's up to you. There are, of course, survival elements. So you have a health bar and you have a stamina bar. But you're not going to die if you don't eat, and you don't need to do things like sleeping. It's not that kind of game. Taking a cue from the Pax Dei devs, I'm going to break this video into 3 main pillars of the game. Homestead, which is basically all the aspects of finding a spot, building a property, developing industry, and the crafting and gathering progression that you need. Secondly, you have the adventuring part of gameplay, and that includes venturing out to find and gather resources, learning the neighbourhood and its features, finding players and people and other properties, coming across wildlife at NPCs, and exploring some of the wilder areas of the map. And thirdly, you have civilization. So that's all the social aspects of the game. That's the individual player encounters and, of course, the clan stuff. So I'm going to start with Homestead. After playing 50 hours, I think I have a fairly good handle on what the game has to offer in terms of the building, resource gathering, and crafting. The resource gathering in this game is infinitely enjoyable, simply because you really need to rely on your wits to find what you're looking for. The game only gives you a very subtle clue about where to find the basic resources you'll need. And mostly you'll need to be following the map's legend, where you can find different biomes and what you'll find in them. As an example, you'll be able to find things like iron, tin, and copper ore in the wildlands area of the map, which is usually an area that runs through the middle of your map, and it's where you can't build or settle. But I'll tell you more about my adventures in this area a bit later on. One important tip when you're out gathering resources is to really only focus on getting 3 or 4 things. This can make it a lot faster. For example, impure iron ore, when you find it, it can also give you nice stones. I think that's how they pronounce that. This is often also found in fields where clay is and also where flax tends to be. So you can see, but this is a much more efficient process if you're just focusing on these things and not gathering other things to clutter up your inventory, because it's quite limited. Another tip is to try and build a basic cooking bench as soon as you can. Now, I didn't, but when I did, I realized how important it was, because it'll give you access to a whole bunch of drinks and food that will help increase your health and stamina, boost regen, and even give you protection against elements like fire for later encounters with magic NPCs. It's also really good to use the auto run button as much as possible until they introduce boats or whatever form of transport they're going to. This will save a small amount of your sanity. Now, there is a limited teleport system at the moment, but it's on a cooldown and it'll only transport you back to the place where you first spawned into the game. So there's no fast traveling or unlocking waypoints at this stage in the game. I've played this first 50 hours almost completely without online guides. I really wanted to figure things out for myself, and only when I was really stuck did I look for help. I'm just not interested in the most efficient ways to do something, even when I'm playing solo. I'm definitely not doing things like min-maxing my character. I just want the experience of having to learn how to do things by myself. I think we have so much information at our fingertips at the moment that I know, for me at least, learning things for myself gives me a greater sense of satisfaction than reading about something and just replicating it in a game. I also appreciate that not everyone has this kind of time to learn and make progress in this way. So one thing I'll suggest, that if you're struggling with a part of the game, Definitely ask your questions in the official Discord for the game. The community and the devs there are really super helpful, and you'll usually get an answer to your question fairly quickly. I'd also recommend using the Pax Dei Universe site for working out recipes and crafting requirements. It can really help to have this handy while you're working out what you need and how much of it when you're crafting. I've put the link to this site and the Pax Dei Discord channel in the description below. Now, talking about crafting, I played the earlier Alpha Wilderness build, and I have to say, since then they seem to have balanced and improved the crafting system dramatically. It still reminds me very much of the crafting from Final Fantasy and Black Desert Online, where you develop skills such as blacksmithing or cooking and unlock new items to be able to craft as you go. You can also fail crafting an item, but you'll get back part of the resources that you've invested if this happens. Having said all that, after 50 hours, crafting is definitely getting harder now, I've noticed. Simply as there's so much to craft, and the barriers to crafting get more complex, obviously. For example, to get the iron reinforced chest, which is a much better storage option than the decorated chests that you can make. This requires planks and iron hinges, wrought iron nails, and iron sheets. So you can see that all these resources in turn require their own crafting requirements. Although it slows down and gets more complex, my excitement when I unlock a new recipe that gives me access to new range of items is very real. And I think it wouldn't feel like such an accomplishment with more people around to share the work. This is one of the elements of playing solo in these type of games that I think people underestimate, is that feeling of achievement when you do something on your own. The building in this game is absolutely incredible and a lot of fun. And I've been spending way too much time planning and building, then knocking down and planning and building again. I'm also a bit of a natural homemaker, so I want flower pots and good lighting. I want my house to look and feel like a comfortable home. As you can see, I started building a separate building for all my industries, and eventually I can expand upwards when I need to place more workbenches and things like the Tier 2 forge, which I believe is actually enormous. So ultimately, I feel as though I worked for my progress at this point. I get that for a lot of people this can be a little daunting simply because of the time and planning you need to invest in the process. In the future, the developers are adding new building elements, including decorative features like grapevine walls. They're also implementing more prop signs, which everyone has requested for labelling storage and areas in your village. So in terms of the next pillar, which is adventure, the adventuring actually feels real. So what do I mean by that? Well, you can't just drop off resources whenever you want because there's no real fast travel system. There is, but like I said earlier, it'll only take you back to the marker where you first spawned in, and there's a cooldown. Your inventory is actually quite limited, so you have to factor that in when you're out adventuring and gathering resources. There are markings on the map, but there are no place names or locations. I've been on a couple of adventures so far, mostly from looking for resources like cotton and copper, but also from just exploring the map a little. One of my first adventures was while I was looking for granite, and I came across a really unique property built into the side of a cliff along the riverbank I settled on. I really wasn't expecting such an interesting and frankly complex building this early in the game. This would have been about 3 days in, I think. So the actual player I came across next to the building was obviously in a guild or a clan. So that might explain the level of civilization they'd achieved early on, but I was blown away by this building. I've also had adventures where I came across ruined castles. And at one point, I also came across an observatory of all things with NPC enemies in it in a field up near the mountains. This actually made my day, as it means when I get stronger, or even if I join a clan later on, I can attempt to get loot from enemies. That time that I found the observatory, I also decided to climb higher up the mountain just because it was there and because I could. And I came across a fairly jaw-dropping view. I could even spot my house way off in the distance and a couple of my neighbours. It really gave me a sense of the scale of my location and the area I had settled in. My most recent adventure that I'll tell you about was a longer journey to see what was in the middle of the map. I was looking for iron and copper, and everyone online had said the wildlands would have these resources. The wildlands are these parts of the maps, generally stretching across a wide band in the middle of the map. And I walked for about 20 minutes in real time through a whole nother land, up through what I thought was the best route to get to this section of the wildlands. And I made it. And joy oh joy, the first thing I see is a mound of tin just waiting for me. On a resource-rich high, I of course ventured further into the area, which has parts that look very different to what I'm used to. It's then that I noticed the enemies, lots of enemies, mostly wolves and angry mages. It was my first real experience with enemies that were much higher level than me and were going to kill me instantly. And as you can see on the map, I died twice. Once trying to escape and once trying to rescue my gear. And talking of difficult enemies, so far the combat has received a fair amount of criticism, and by combat I mean both PvE and PvP combat. And the devs are working on making it feel more realistic and satisfying. I didn't get a chance to try out the PvP mechanics in the alpha, and I haven't really had time to investigate it in this full release, but I will. PvE combat against animals seems okay to me. I haven't really tried against the NPCs, so I don't really know. I've tried a few weapons so far, and they all feel very different, and they feel different enough to keep my interest. For example, I tried bows against the fast-moving deer, and I think with better, maybe wrought iron arrows, it might be more successful. So in their roadmap going forward, the devs are going to focus on this adventure part of gameplay. They're going to have a complete PvP overhaul, aiming for a challenging combat system that balances skill with character progression. They're going to introduce new content like weapons, armour and spells, along with potential activities such as fishing, which sounds a lot of fun. The developers also plan to gradually introduce story elements, so you're going to be learning more about the lore and possibly even the mythical creatures that live in the land. So that adventure I mentioned earlier, where I went into the wildlands and I died a lot, it actually leads really neatly into this section on civilization and the social aspects of the game. It kind of taught me that I'm not going to make it in an area like that by myself. I'm probably going to need people, preferably strong tank-type people who will clear the area and let me mine to my heart's content. A little bit later on, I also attempted to explore a cave, and it showed me basically the same thing. Either I'm severely underleveled in terms of gear, which is probably the case, or I'm supposed to do this stuff with people. So remember when I said that this is a directed sandbox MMO? This is what I meant. I think they want people to be sociable and join up to learn about the world and defeat the NPCs and dungeons around the map. I think once they start giving us more of the lore about what's going on in this world, as they've hinted in their future roadmap, this is going to become even more important. In terms of individual player interaction, so far my experience has been overwhelmingly positive. On my first day, I had a player stop by while I was building my property, and they just wanted to say hi and that they were keeping an eye on my building as it looked really interesting. So this made my day, and that warm feeling has basically carried me through the game up till now, with every interaction kind of friendly. I know there's role-playing servers that you can play on that are developing at the moment, and they've become fairly popular. And if that's your thing, I think it could work very well in this game, especially when they introduce roles or make it so you can set yourself up as a local blacksmith or baker or whatever you want to be. So let's look at some of the complaints I have, and honestly, most of them revolve around quality of life features that I think they're going to introduce later on. Not being able to cancel an item in the crafting queue is really annoying, and they're going to have to fix that. Some form of transport like a horse or a boat, or even like an enshrouded type wing system that you could go short distances but would help to cut some of the more mundane walking out of the game. That would be fantastic. There's no area chat. And if there was, it could make playing as a solo easier, as you could arrange cave or castle runs with nearby players. Again, this is obviously deliberate, as they want to direct you into forming or joining a clan. Not being able to recycle or break down items you've crafted means you're going to end up throwing out a lot of materials like beehives and resin on the ground where it eventually despawns. This is the type of quality of life changes they're going to change or introduce later in the early access build. You can do things like cheese killing NPCs and animals like the black bears, apparently. You can either go up high so they can't reach you, or you get them stuck in the landscape somehow. When it comes time for me to need the resources from these kills, I might actually resort to doing this solo if I haven't joined up with a clan yet. I mean, nothing is stopping me from creating my own clan and making it a kind of loose collection of people in the local area who want to do the same thing I want to do. I might need to look at this approach in the future. In terms of the Pax Dei roadmap, civilization in the game will evolve from the basic clan structures to a richer, player-driven social system. Their goal is to offer various roles for political and warfare engagement. The economy will be player-centric, with most items being player-crafted. And upcoming features include a gold currency, market stalls for trading, and potentially altars and even miracles. So where am I at after 50 hours? Well, I have a beautiful property that I'm really proud of. I'm working my way into wrought iron technology, linen cloth, and more complex food and drinks for buffs while I adventure and gather resources. I just got into alchemy, which is kind of exciting, and I'm working on upgrading my weaponsmithing for wrought iron gear such as pickaxes and the wood axe. I have a really good fix on where I can get most of the resources I'd need now. I've explored some of the map outside my little region, and I'm pretty interested in exploring more. I'm also pretty ambitious about my plans for becoming stronger, and maybe even being able to take on some of those NPCs or even explore the caves around me. Apparently, stronger resources and gear for magic can drop from these NPCs, and that may be a great path forward for me. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is the fact that the game is super immersive. This is basically thanks to the absolutely incredible audio design and the graphics. I settled by the water mainly because of the proximity to resources, but also because it was just spectacularly beautiful. And the unique sounds I hear during the day and night, the sounds of the river and the forest, it's completely peaceful. So overall, my verdict on the game is that you will love it if you go in knowing what the game is and what it isn't. If you enjoy a less hand-holding survival type experience. The social aspect of this game is something I'd like to explore more, because I think there could be a lot of fun actually being part of a village or even a small town, especially when they introduce roles and things like the market stall where you can sell products to other players. So what do you think? Are you playing right now and have had a similar experience to me? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.